the Modern Library's Greatest 100 English Written Novels of the 20th Century, number 43. This title of this list, the 100 Greatest, etc., is very misleading. When you get yourself a copy of this amazing list, and you should do, you think, well, 100 books, that's not too daunting, not too overwhelming. The thing of it is, though, is that it's not 100 books, it's 100 titles. In fact, there are several trilogies. The Alexandria Quartet, that's 4 books, and number 43, A Dance to the Music of Time by Anthony Powell, 12 volumes. Each novel is about 250 pages, give or take, right around that area. So 12 books at 250 pages, 3,000 pages. And should you read it? You absolutely should. Without question, you should make it a goal of yours. If you love literature, you really want to sink your teeth into a long, extended, slow building story. Make it a goal of yours to read this series, because you'll discover that 3,000 pages, it's not scary. It's just a question of time. Like, it's 12 books. I think most people can easily read 12 novels in 1 year. Easily. If you were to do that, you could read the entire series in 1 year. How long did it take me? Well, I don't like to brag, but it didn't take a year. So let's talk about A Dance to the Music of Time. And let's drink some beer while we're doing it. So, A Dance to the Music of Time, like the painting which inspired the title of the series, 12 novels divided into 4 sections. Number 1, spring. Number 2, summer. 3, autumn. 4, winter, of course. Let me just give you a little rundown of the titles of the novels and the years that they were published. 1951, the series begins with A Question of Upbringing. 1952, A Buyer's Market. 1955, The Acceptance World, and that is spring. Summer, At Lady Molly's, 1957. 1960, Casanova's Chinese Restaurant. It's not as exciting as you think. 1962, The Kindly Ones. That's 3. All right, so we move to winter. 1964, The Valley of Bones. 1966, The Soldier's Art. 1968, The Military Philosophers. And we get to the winter section of the series. 1971, Books Do Furnish a Room. 1973, Temporary Kings. And finally, 1975, Hearing Secret Harmonies. He was writing this series, the first one published in 1951, the final one published in 1975. Think of the commitment and the raw artistic determination to go through with something so fantastic. Like, really, honestly, so committed to this series. I wonder if he got halfway through and he thought, oh man, I guess everybody's going to laugh at me if I don't finish it. So the first 6 volumes had already been published and you're like, oh God, how many more do I have to write? And you know exactly how many more. You've still got 6 left. The first novel begins with the character we're following. It is his story, and his name is Nicholas Jenkins. The entire series is the life of this one man. He has 2 close friends. There is Peter Templar and there is Charles Stringham. The first novel in the series is mainly concerned with their lives at Oxford as young university students. There is a 4th young man who is not a very sympathetic character. His name is Kenneth Widmerpool. Even though this is such a massive series of novels, I really don't want to give too much away, and especially because Widmerpool is, can I say this? Even though he's a very unpleasant character, I didn't have any happy feelings for him at all. He is one of the principal characters in the series, and he is a constant reoccurring character. More, I think, than any other character in the novel aside from the main character himself. But that's nice. I mean, it's nice to have, he's not a villain. He's just a very, very unpleasant character. However, like the first time we meet him, Widmerpool, he's jogging because he wants to get onto, I think, the football team or the rugby team. He realizes that his skills are not adequate enough to get onto the team, but he keeps persistently jogging, hoping that his determination will just somehow blossom into the ability to get on the team. That if he trains hard enough, he'll make it. Even though most people look at him and they say, no, he won't make it. He just is not, he doesn't have the talent. The amazing thing about Widmer-Pohl is he's quite aware that he doesn't have the talent, not only to join the rugby team, but later in life. But if he shows enough determination and persistence, he will outwork the other guys through his kind of maniacal determination to succeed. And that will really come to play much, much later in the series, where we see that he just works harder than other people, and that determination allows him to succeed more than other people. However, just as a character, like, he never really becomes likable. So we have these 4 young men at Oxford University, and they get up to some hijinks. There's one little episode that I want to speak about because the main character, Nicholas Jenkins, his Uncle Giles comes. And Uncle Giles is really, initially, he was one of my favorite characters in the novels because he's sort of the man who, people don't know what Uncle Giles does for years or months of his life. He kind of disappears. He reappears with money or some weird new job. Is he some international man of mystery? Or is he just some kind of a vagabond hobo? We don't know. But he's Uncle Giles, and he was quickly one of my favorites. And he appears at Oxford to speak to his nephew, Nicholas, without really thinking about it because he's quite an eccentric. Uncle Giles smokes a cigarette in Nicholas's dormitory room, which is, strictly, verboten. And the dormitory master, once Uncle Giles has already, absconded, the dormitory master comes in and it's like, I smell cigarette smoke in here, and, smoking is completely unpermitted. So Nicholas, this university boy, has to explain to the master, like, well, my uncle came and he's a bit of a, you can't tell a man like that just not to smoke. I mean, it doesn't register. The first novel in the series, not too much happens, I do have to say. Like, it's not a novel that's filled with action or tension, and that's fine. So when I finished reading the first book in the series, I thought, well, okay, all right, so Anthony Powell, what he's done is he's taken out the chess pieces and he's sort of, showed you, there's the pawn, there's the knight, and he's put the pieces onto the table. And in the second book, or maybe at the latest in the third book, we will begin to make some moves and find out what is happening in the story. Because when I finished reading the first book, I wasn't quite sure what the story was, except that we were following this one man. The second book, A Buyer's Market, begins. It's like this big tour bus pulls up, the doors open, and a dozen new characters come walking out to the bus and say, okay, we're here now. You think, well, all right. I mean, it is 3,000 pages. We are going to need quite a lot of characters. And I believe this series of novels is actually famous for having quite a roster of characters. The second novel occurs, and then the third novel, the same thing happens. Another tour bus pulls up, the doors open, and another dozen, or maybe even 20 new characters unload and say, yes, we are here now, and now we're in the story. And you might think that, okay, all right, by the time we get to novel 6 or novel 7 or even novel 8, that will stop happening. By the time we get to the 8th book in the series, surely we will have enough characters. No, because that's not the way life happens. It's not like you get to your 50s or your 60s or your 70s and you stop meeting new people. And I suppose this would be a good time to say that this series of novels is based loosely on Anthony Powell's own life. There's a young man at Oxford. He graduates, he tries to get a job, he's meeting girls, he's, flirting, maybe he's thinking about who he wants to get married to, has difficulty in his career. His friends are getting married, his friends are having children, his friends are getting divorced. These ones are having affairs, and, these ones are causing trouble in their life. That one becomes an alcoholic, that one goes off. They lost all their money in London, so they have to go off to India to try to salvage some kind of finances. It is the story of life. Spring, as we all know, the time for youthful dalliance and enjoyment and growth and trying to develop some maturity and some sophistication. Summer, the time for, what is summer the time for? Well, fun and really the greatest period of your life where you have the most fun, and you also should be planting the seeds for the most successful career relationships that you will have. Then we get to autumn. Because this is a chronological story, when we get to autumn, we have the intervention of the Second World War. I had very, very high hopes for this. I thought, okay, now that's what it was all building up to. It was all going to be building up to the Second World War, and like this is where all the fireworks, all the, the magic is going to happen in the series. It doesn't. Like the tone doesn't change. The level of drama does not change. The main character, Nick Jenkins, goes to the war, but he's not very capable as a soldier. And so he spends the Second World War as someone who takes care of quite a lot of paperwork, which is not very glorious, is not very... I don't think that's what anyone really imagines when we think about the war. The people that do all the stuff in the background, the people who have to requisition all the supplies, the ammunition, the weapons, trying to get the doctors and the nurses billeted in certain locations that's far enough away from the action. All that horrible paperwork that needs to be read and copied and signed, there were people that did that. A lot of them, quite a lot of them. It's not picturesque, but it was meaningful, and it was someone's life, which is not negligible. It is not less than anyone else's life. That might be one of the grand themes, that this enormous body of work is the story of one man's life, and all of the people he meets, the interactions he has, the effects that people have on his life, people who help him to get a job, the people who keep, as I said, Widmer Pole keeps showing up, and he helps him, and sometimes he doesn't help him. And that's all I can say about that. Maybe don't be like me and expect that when you get to the Second World War, that's going to be all the action and the adventure that I was kind of craving. However, my overall opinion of this series is that it is wonderful. Very, very much worth reading, and you should not be intimidated to read this because it's huge. Yes, that is true. It is enormous, but it's worth it. Like, it is very, very much worth your time and patience and persistence. Like, it's really not very hard to read 12 novels. Some of the commonly asked questions about this series is, do you need to read all of the books in order for it to make sense? Unquestionably, yes. Imperative. You must read the entire series from book 1 to book 12. A lot of people, because Casanova's Chinese Restaurant has the funniest title, a lot of people, they want to read that one. Like, can I read that one? Yes, of course you can. Will it make any sense to me if I read that one alone? No, it will not. You're not going to know who all of these dozens of characters are and how they relate to one another and why the main character, Nick Jenkins, cares about these ones and he'd be annoyed with these ones. Please let me give you some advice about this series. Buy this one, because it's beautiful. The best version I've seen. Read the first book, 250 pages, that's all. If you read 25 pages a day, that's 10 days, a week and a half. Like, you could read all the first 3 novels in, week and a half, 3 weeks, 4.5 weeks. You can read all of this in just a little bit over a month. And think about it. Think about, do you want to read the rest? You might say yes, you might say no. Let me read you the very first page of the first novel. The men at work at the corner of the street had made a kind of camp for themselves, where, marked out by tripods hung with red hurricane lamps, an abyss in the road led down to a network of subterranean drain pipes. Gathered round the bucket of coke that burned in front of the shelter, several figures were swinging arms against bodies and rubbing hands together with large, pantomimic gestures, like comedians giving formal expression to the concept of extreme cold. One of them, a spare fellow in blue overalls, taller than the rest, with a jocular demeanor and long pointed nose, like that of a Shakespearean clown, suddenly stepped forward and, as if performing a rite, cast some substance, apparently the remains of 2 kippers, loosely wrapped in newspaper, on the bright coals of the fire, causing the flames to leap fiercely upwards, smoke curling about in eddies of the northeast wind. As the dark fumes floated above the houses, snow began to fall, gently, from a dull sky, each flake giving a small hiss as it reached the bucket. That opening paragraph has almost nothing, has really nothing to do at all. I read that, and my first inclination was, I have to get the rest of the books in the series, because I ordered this one online, and I said, okay, I'll read this, and then I'll get the others if I like it. I read that first paragraph, and immediately I knew that I had to read the entire series from cover to cover to cover to cover. I don't know what it is about that opening paragraph. I realize that he's giving a bit of a vague picture, something very atmospheric, and I love that. There's something about the creation of an atmosphere. It's something I love in literature. Like you have to build that atmosphere carefully and beautifully and realistically. And if you do that as a writer, man, I'm going to read your books. And then we discovered that it's actually the main character, Nicholas Jenkins. He sees this. It's just an image he sees on his way to his dormitory rooms. That's all. But I just found the writing so engaging that I wanted to read the whole series. Because it's so enormous, and because there are like really quite an unpleasant number of characters, well over 100 principal characters, I knew that the only way that someone like me with my very limited attention span and memory could read this series was just to read the entire thing, just read it all. And I'm very happy I did so, because I think that sometimes we have to give the respect to the author. I've said this before about extremely long novels, that I think sometimes we have a bad attitude that, we think a novel is so long, it's such a burden to read something like that. But think about the author, think about the burden that they have as someone who has to put in the work to keep the creative fire burning for such an extended period of time, to keep that enthusiasm and to keep that the will, the sheer human artistic will to keep producing this work of art. And I think that really needs to be respected. And I think that as a reader, if there's a series, I want to read the series. If you say, okay, here's a series of books, but this one is the best one. And like, why would I have the attitude that, okay, I'll just read the best one because that's the best one, and I don't need to be bothered with the other ones? I mean, like, how lazy is that? How cavalier that attitude to say, well, yes, there is some poor artist who was just dying to deliver this enormous vision to us, and me, because I'm a lazy guy and I say, I don't have too much time for that, I'll just only read one or two. What a shitty attitude that is. And so I don't want to have that attitude. With the Mishima series, read them all. Books 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? That's how you do it. John Dos Passos, the USA trilogy, like one of my all-time favorites. Read them all. Don't say, I'll read one and maybe next year I'll read the next one. Like, it doesn't work, man. Nobody's memory is that good. Like, you need to keep the thread. If you leave such an extended amount of time between the volumes, it's going to be too hard to pick it up. You're not going to be able to get back into the flow of the story. So please do yourself a favor. I think just having these books on your bookcases, they're a joy to look at and to appreciate. Not mine, because I beat the hell out of my books. It's because I read in the bath. Just as a few closing comments about Anthony Powell, please try to appreciate that he was producing one of these books on average like once every 2 years, 250 pages. It's mind-boggling. And he was writing the books over a period from like 1951 to 1975, and the world changed so much. And you can see that in the novels, and I think you can even see it in his style and his tone. That's something that is fun to watch for. I think when I read this series of books a second time, because I certainly will, that will be something fun for me to see how perhaps his voice changes. Because as an artist, 25 years, the best part of your life, in a way. If you started writing the series as a young man and you finished writing the series as an old man, 25 years is the best chunk of your life. The one little bit of information that I got about him that I thought was quite good was that he was one of the organizers of the funeral for George Orwell. That wasn't actually his real name, George Orwell's name. George Orwell's real name was Eric Blair. But, most people are, everybody's familiar with George Orwell, even though that wasn't the man's actual name. He organized the funeral for one of the greatest British writers of the 20th century. I just, I love those little footnotes so much. Like, maybe if you're on a budget, go to the library, see how many editions they have. If you can scour around some of the the really good secondhand bookstores, because these books are not too common. Like, you'll find one here and there, but I think you'll want to have them as like a collection, So the first 3 novels, Spring, that's one collection. The way, I've got 4 volumes, each containing 3 novels. If you read 25 pages a day, you could read the entire series in half a year. And I think you'll really want to. There's something about a very long story that people really enjoy, that, there's a richness and there is a familiarity that is, you can't ignore. It's like people who read comic books, they just keep, it's like you meet old friends every time you read the comic book. It's like, oh, these are my friends. And, with most novels are fairly short. And so you get this little experience. And that's, why we want to reread the novels. We want to go back and visit those friends. And here you're getting such a long, extended experience with Nicholas Jenkins and all of the people in his life. I remember very specifically when I read this series, it was during COVID, no surprise. It was like the world was on pause, everything was shut down. I lost my job. And I thought, okay, here's a perfect time to read this Anthony Powell series, and I'll try to read 50 pages a day. So that's a novel every 5 days. It's funny because I got a telephone call from, very occasionally I will do some background work for the television series that they're filming in Vancouver, and they called me and they said, Grant, we've got a 1 week job, which is really quite rare. Like, usually for the background people, it's 1 day. Like they need a security guard, 1 day. They need some people milling about, 1 day. But occasionally they'll be filming one long scene, and they will need the same background people over and over and over. And so they called me and they said, it's a week job, and it's going to be 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight every single day, downtown Vancouver, so it's very convenient. Do you want it? I said, yeah, of course I do. It was, some big money for me. And it was on this television series called Motherland, about these young witches who somehow are working for the American military, maybe. And it was funny because we all had to wear masks, and they were trying to disguise the fact that we were wearing masks. I think I even still have here it was. I don't know if can you see that? Motherland, season 2 background. Why did I keep this thing? I have no idea. The memorabilia from our lives. Very appropriate for the Anthony Powell series. So yeah. So I was working on that. You can't see me, really. I mean, if you see a guy in a brown leather jacket in the background with a, black thing on his face, that's probably me. I've never seen the series, and I've done background stuff for so many shows, and I've never actually watched the episodes. So it's funny for me that somewhere out there, in television land, in popular culture, I'm out there, like this specter in the background. Anyway, what a long, boring story that was. But while I was doing background work, if you've never done background work, it's 80% sitting and waiting, 10% you're on set actually doing something. The other 10% is eating, drinking coffee, and going to the toilet. So while I had all of that free time, I just sat there and I read these books. That was really fun for me. So, how the hell are we going to do this? Whoever's name I'm about to announce, I'm not going to mail you all 4 of the books. I mean, that's just, I'm generous, but I'm not made of money. I mean, I'll mail you the first one. I would like you to have the whole series, but I'm just not going to mail them all to you. I mean, I'll have to mail them in a shoebox, and it's going to cost like $100. Like, even if you lived in Toronto, that would still be quite a lot of money. Emma, the very first supporter I had on Patreon. Emma, thank you so much. You were the first one to donate money to my channel. Emma lives in Australia. Thank you, Emma. You were there like almost right at the very beginning of when I started my YouTube channel, and I really, really appreciated it. And I will happily mail you that edition right there. It's going to cost a fortune to send it to Australia, but I don't mind because you've been donating every single month. All right, thank you very much for watching, everyone. This is Grant Loves Books. If you want to get a part of the book lottery, oh Jesus Christ, I totally forgot. And I'm also going to send you a copy of my magazine with my writing, The Friend from Budapest, which is my short stories, and it's very, very good. And thank you, everyone, by the way, who have bought a copy of my magazine and I've mailed them to you. I hope that they've arrived by now. I mailed a bunch of them earlier this week. It's Saturday night right now. So if you haven't received your copy yet, just give it one more week because it's Christmas time. So maybe it's a little bit slow, and hopefully you'll have received yours soon. And I hope you like it. I hope that, you're happy with your little unique magazine. Emma, thank you very much for supporting the channel. All right, the video's too long now. Very much like a Dance to the Music of Time itself. It just goes on and on and on. It's fantastic. Please read it. But a lot of people have told me that it's the greatest thing they've ever read, and many people have said that they've read it multiple times. Okay, thank you very much. Take care. See you later. Unsympathetic. We don't actually use that word in English. That's a very... Sorry, sometimes I slip into that Hungarian. In Hungarian, if you say someone is unsympathetic, it means that you don't like them. It's a person that you can't get along with, or they rub you the wrong way. It's not really appropriate to say that in English, but somehow recently I keep using that phrase, unsympathetic. Yeah, that'll get cut out.